America's most violent, wealthy family. I mean, talk about clickbait, right? This is the kind of myth that just circles endlessly online, perfectly designed to grab your attention and make you imagine some crazy, sinister backroom plots. It's a highly dramatic title for sure, but it begs a pretty fundamental question: how much of it is actually true? Spoiler alert, not much. I challenge you today to look right past that sensationalism with me, because what we're about to explore is a story of intense resilience, incredible innovation, and yes, a genuine tragedy, but absolutely not the kind of malicious violence this kind of marketing wants you to believe.
To really get to the bottom of this, we've got to contrast the myth with the reality. The myth reads like a Hollywood true crime script, but the reality? Well, it actually revolves around, of all things, bottled horseradish, a totally revolutionary use of clear glass, and eventually, a deeply tragic accident. As you'll see, the real story of this family's immigrant entrepreneurship and their incredible rise to immense wealth is an absolute masterclass in business, not a thriller novel. The whole thing actually starts with a guy who was literally known as the horseradish kid. I love that. Senator John Heinz. Born in 1844 in Pittsburgh to German immigrant parents, he was just incredibly driven from day one. I mean, the kid was already out selling produce door to door by the time he was just 8 years old. But fast forward to 1875, and he actually found himself starting completely from scratch. To understand why, we really need to look at his rocky early career.
See, Henry's path to success was, well, it was anything but smooth. By age 25, he'd teamed up with a neighbor to bottle stuff like horseradish, pickles, vinegar, and sauerkraut. But then total disaster struck. He was falsely accused of moving inventory out of the reach of his creditors. And he wasn't just sued, he was actually arrested. For a traditional German Lutheran family back then, this was an unimaginable disgrace. Eventually, the banking panic of 1875 wiped him out entirely, forcing him into bankruptcy. He lost absolutely everything, and brought some deep shame to his family name.
And this brilliantly illustrates exactly who he was. Henry didn't quit. He completely rebuilt. Now, at the time, every single competitor out there used dark glass bottles. Why? Simply to hide whatever cheap fillers or gross, low-quality ingredients were floating around in their products. But Heinz made this deceptively simple, radical bet. He put his condiments in clear glass. He wagered that absolute transparency and honesty would sell a whole lot better than concealment. He literally wanted his customers to see the pure quality of what they were buying.
And wow, did that bet on transparency pay off massively. This concept of radical honesty didn't just boost his sales, it fundamentally changed the entire food industry. Consumers could actually see his products were pure, so they trusted them. By 1896, he officially trademarks the famous 57 varieties. But get this, his impact went way beyond his own company's profits. Heinz personally lobbied for the 1906 Pure Food and Drug Act. By doing that, he essentially forced the entire rest of the industry to adopt the exact same standards of transparency he'd already built his brand on. He literally made honesty the law.
Let's move to and see how this builds across the decades. This commitment to quality really built an empire spanning generations. We start with Henry's birth in 1844, and he leads the whole operation until he passes away in 1919. At that point, his son Howard takes over. The family leadership just keeps going when his grandson, Jack, or Senator John Heinz II, takes the reins in 1941. Jack runs the business for decades until 1966, which is actually a massive turning point, because that's when the company named a CEO from outside the family for the very first time.
And speaking of Jack Heinz, he represents such a fascinating evolution of the family status. We're talking a Yale man, a member of the ultra-elite Skull and Bones Society, and the guy who built the family's stunning Fox Chapel estate known as Rosemont Farm. When you look at Jack's life, the contrast is just incredible. The family had gone from a disgraced, bankrupt horseradish kid peddling goods door to door, all the way to the absolute pinnacle of American high society and immense generational wealth. Jack also raised the next highly notable member of the family, his son, John.
Section 10. A genuine tragedy. Senator John Heinz III.
So, to understand what happened to John Heinz III, who, by the way, was an incredibly popular U.S. senator from Pennsylvania and widely considered by many as a likely future governor, we need to look at the exact sequence of events on April 4, 1991. First, the senator is traveling in a chartered Piper Aerostar aircraft, and it gets a landing gear warning light on its approach to Philly. A nearby helicopter actually offers to help out by flying underneath the plane to do a quick visual check. But as the two aircraft are flying in incredibly tight formation over Lower Merion, tragedy strikes. The helicopter accidentally collides with the plane from below. The aftermath of that midair collision was just completely devastating. Both aircraft went down right near an elementary school. Senator Heinz was killed instantly, along with the 2 pilots in his plane and the 2 helicopter pilots. And heartbreakingly, 2 6-year-old girls playing on the school playground below were also killed by falling debris. When investigators thoroughly reviewed the crash, they explicitly attributed it to poor judgment by both sets of pilots attempting a highly dangerous maneuver. It was a genuinely awful, absolutely tragic freak accident. But to be crystal clear here, it is not the result of some sinister plot or family violence as the clickbait myths suggest.
Section 13. Where the fortune went.
Following that sudden, devastating loss, the family had to navigate a totally new era, figuring out exactly what would happen to this immense wealth and this iconic brand that Henry John Heinz had built. The senator's wife, Teresa Heinz, inherited a substantial fortune. She later remarried another prominent politician, Senator John Kerry, becoming Teresa Heinz Kerry. Through her, the Heinz name and its massive legacy found itself totally intertwined in national politics for yet another generation, continuing the family's major public presence, just in a slightly different arena than the condiment aisles. Meanwhile, the company itself just kept on growing under successive non-family leadership, and all that growth eventually culminated in this absolute monster of a number, $23 billion. In 2013, the H.J. Heinz Company was bought out by 3G Capital and Warren Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway for a cool $23 billion. To put that massive figure into perspective for you, that price represented a huge 19% premium over the company's prior all-time stock high. That humble little horseradish business, it had transformed into a multi-billion-dollar global powerhouse. Now, right before we wrap up today, there is one really fascinating historical footnote from our sources that definitely fuels some of those crazy internet dynasty rumors we talked about at the beginning. You've probably seen the whispers online and wondered, wait, what about the Trump connection? Is the Heinz family somehow secretly tied to the Trump family? Well, historically speaking, the answer is actually yes. Henry Heinz's mother's family were the Trumps, and they originally came from a town called Kaldstadt in the Bavarian Palatinate. And yes, that is the exact same Trump family of recent political fame. Because of this shared origin back in Bavaria, Henry Heinz and the Trump family are indeed distant relatives. It's just one of those really interesting small-world historical quirks that history throws at us sometimes, which inevitably adds a ton of fuel to the lore surrounding American dynasties. So the crucial point is this: when we take a step back and look at the totality of the facts, the true legacy of the Heinz family is incredibly rich, entirely on its own. We have an immigrant who completely overcomes deep public disgrace to build an empire based on the wild concept of radical honesty. We see a massive company that evolved across 5 generations of leadership. We see a family marked by a horrific, tragic freak aviation accident. And ultimately, we see a business legacy that culminates in an unbelievable private equity buyout by financial titans. Is it dramatic? Absolutely. But America's most violent, wealthy family? Not even close. That is purely sensationalized marketing, which leaves us with a vital question to ponder. Knowing the deeply fascinating, highly complex, real history of the Heinz family, why do we so often let sensational clickbait rewrite our past? It's an excellent reminder that the truth, with its clear glass bottles, its very real human tragedies, and its undeniable world-changing innovations, is always more compelling than the internet fiction. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. And